Welcome to the Will to Change Project. My name is Fatal Pros. I'm here with my special guest, very special guest, AzaKakenA 111, who's newer to TikTok and who is also my lovely wife. We're here to discuss narcissism. And Aza, you've been in your master's program to be a therapist with a focus on helping the African American community. You're also a poet. And so definitely wanted to get your thoughts on this particular topic. Without further ado, we can jump right into, some of these topics. First of all, if you could just, I know that in TikTok land, right, the word narc or narcissist gets thrown around a lot, right? Is there any problem? Typically, there's a label of narcissism and maybe potentially an overdiagnosis. So, could you just tell a little bit about like what is a narcissist, right? And how do they treat themselves and how do they treat other people?
Okay, so first, uh, often people kind of get two things kind of mixed up. So, narcissism is a trait. Often people, I think, are thinking about narcissistic personality disorder, which is a personality disorder. But narcissism, and you'll see me looking down because I write everything down. But
Perfectly fine.
but as I said, narcissism is a personality trait, and the person or the narcissistic person, basically, they just have an overinflated sense of themselves. They lack empathy pretty much completely. So they don't have the ability to care uh, about how their actions affect other people. Their primary concern is what they need, what they want, what they're feeling, what they want to get out of the situation. So that's kind of what that is. And you said, what was the other part? How do they treat themselves?
Yeah, how do they treat themselves? Like, what's their relationship with themselves and what's their relationship with other people?
So narcissists they think that they're amazing. They think that they're perfect. They, like I said, they have an overinflated sense of self. So for the most part, they're good to themselves. They treat everyone else horribly, especially in like a love relationship. And also, there are also cases where the parents are narcissists, and they use their children as supply. So narcissists are pretty quite horrible to the people around them.
So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Just well, first of all, what's the difference between someone who's like diagnosed with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and someone exhibiting narcissistic traits?
Okay, so the difference is the diagnosis itself. The diagnosis for narcissistic personality disorder, the person would have to meet like a minimum of 5 out of 9 criteria that's found in the DSM, which is for anybody that's in the counseling field. They know that's the counseling Bible, that's the psychological Bible, you know what I mean? So everything pretty much is in there. So they have to meet like 5 of those criteria, which can be actually, hold on, I'll just get it. But usually grandiosity is like the big piece. Lacking empathy. Give me 1 second because I
No,
had
that's
it
perfectly
open
fine.
and then I missed it. But
I know
bas-
Expect Abundance says, I'm convinced that the patriarchal ideology is confused with narcissism. That's why so many women, I don't know if so many women complain that they're with narcs. We want to get into that today, actually. Expect Abundance. That's one of the reasons we wanted to get into this topic. On the Will to Change Project, the primary topic is dismantling patriarchy. And the thought was, is there a connection between narcissism, right, and the people and men and women that we struggle with that we might call narcissism and the patriarchal ideology and how it's put out there. So peace, disaster girl. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining Different Strokes. Please go ahead and like the live if you will. Please share it with your friends. It'd be most appreciated. Aza, you were going to pull up the DSM to see, if they're, to go into the clinical definition.
So, finally found it. So, for narcissistic personality disorder, the diagnostic criteria, as I said, have to be five or more of the following. So, the grandiose sense of self-importance, for example, they exaggerate their achievements, they make everything about themselves bigger. Next, they're preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success and power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. The third is they believe that they're special and unique, and that they can only be understood by other people who are special or high status. They require excessive amounts of admiration. They have a overly inflated sense of entitlement. That's a biggie. They have unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with what their expectations or whims might be. They're very exploitative in their interpersonal relationships. So, as I mentioned before, love relationships, parent-child relationships, nobody's actually safe. As I mentioned, Biggie, they lack empathy. They're unwilling to acknowledge that anybody else has feelings. It doesn't. Other people's feelings just do not matter. Will not. Often they're envious of others, but they'll say that others are envious of them. And they're often really haughty and arrogant. So those are the 9. And for someone, if they're being diagnosed, first of all, but they have to have at least 5 of those. And quite often, they have all 9.
So that brings up a good question. Like with the parent child dynamic, right? So let's say your parent is a narcissist. Like how does that affect the child? And can narcissism be passed down from family lines, like from mother to daughter or father to son, or is it more so just with that specific narcissist? That when you said you use the term supply, can you go into like what supply means and what it means to be the supply of a narcissist?
Okay, so narcissists are takers. So the supply would be the person or persons that they're taking from. Um, so, say for example, their love interest. The person's trying to love them, care for them, etc. But the narcissist is, after they kind of do the love bombing thing and kind of draw the person in, then they start the actual relationship from their perspective, which is nothing but abuse. Um, can it be passed down? It can be. There are some studies that have shown there's probably some neurobiological genetic connection, but also the behaviors themselves. Because of course, children model what they see, so children can pick up those behaviors.
Wow. Okay. So I wanted to, talk a little bit about like what would you say in your own words? What is patriarchy in your own words? And is there a relationship with patriarchy and narcissism? And if so, what? And how does that show up in the world? And if not, why not?
So, um, and as I said, you can see me looking down because I write everything down.
Hey,
Uh,
it's perfectly fine. I'm the exact opposite. I write nothing down at all.
but, so patriarchy is a social construct. I call everything social construct, but it's a socially constructed system that presents the male of the species in the power or control position, and that's just based on the fact that they're male. This is not based on competence or anything else. Um, so by them having that power position, that places them in control of um, pretty much everything, like all of the life aspects, women's wages, to their understanding, women's bodies, you name it, they have a say on it. Feel like they can speak to that with some measure of authority, though they're not women. Um, and quite often, what I find is with those patriarchal situations, um, it puts them in a advantaged position, which of course then means that women are put in a seriously disadvantaged position. Um, let's see. And one of the other things that I was thinking about with that question, because of the type of system that it is, it focuses on control, dominance, and power held tightly by the male of the species. And narcissism kind of works that same way. So they may not be, exactly the same thing, but they definitely work, in my opinion, in lockstep. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
patriarchy, there's that sense of entitlement. In narcissism, there's that sense of entitlement. In both, that sense of entitlement has males or the narcissist, because narcissists can be female as well, feeling like if you don't conform to what they feel is accurate, then they can get just ticked off at you. You know what I mean? So like, no matter what happens, you're in the wrong if you don't agree with them.
That 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 makes sense because when I think about specifically on this app in the social media world, there's just a lot of anger. You know what I mean? And it's why specifically I'm speaking about men that are angry about an idea. You know what I mean? Like women to be submissive, and some women will say, "Well, no, I don't want to be submissive to you." Total stranger, by the way, and they're upset. Like, wait a minute, that's what I mean, and it's the very strict ideas of this box that I want you to be in as a woman, and if you're outside of that box, then automatically there's some type of affront, whether we know each other or not. So I definitely agree. The entitlement is certainly there was a Venn diagram between narcissism and patriarchy. Male entitlement would almost have it be like one circle. So you spoke a little bit about there being like male and female narcissists, and thinking specifically about like patriarchy and the way that power dynamic works. What would if there are any differences? What are the differences between a male narcissist and a female narcissist, and how they might behave and show up in as far in relationships and in like social settings?
Okay, so that's a good question because I've encountered male and female narcissists, because it's not just within a love relationship, right? You can have friends that are narcissists. You can have family members. So it's just whatever relationship. But one of the things that I would say a big difference can be men or males are more aggressive, whereas female narcissists would be maybe a bit more passive aggressive, a bit more covert, actually. Oftentimes, male narcissists are, well, they can come into like two different ranges, either overt or covert. But females seem to be more covert. You know what I mean? They can present sometimes because they're manipulative. That's a big part of it. Their manipulative tactics can be using their sensual selves or using their sensuality or sexuality to kind of lure and manipulate, because their goal is to manipulate. Males are, like I said, they're more aggressive, and that's really a big part because you'll see more of like what's called narcissistic rage out of men or out of males. And also with I think with males, there's a bit more of a chance for actual physical violence.
Hmm. No, I was thinking about that. We often get into this conversation about like toxic masculinity, and I think the misleading part of it, or the part where some people get confused, is when they talk about toxic femininity. They want to talk about it as if it's the complete, it's the same thing, the same toxicity, just in a female body, right? But because of the power dynamic, when you're talking about toxic masculinity, you're talking about overly aggressive behavior. We're talking about outlandishly, sometimes dangerous behavior. to prove or establish or maintain your idea of masculinity. So you have people that excessive drinking, it's excessive risk taking, or just really not in conversations having to dominate or always be in control of the situation. I mean, even when it doesn't make sense to be so. Whereas with toxic femininity, you're looking at also over conforming to that gender role. So now you're having someone who's overly submissive. It's almost like the damsel in distress effect, right? You can do it. You're more than capable, but you feign helplessness as a form of manipulation. That would be more so toxic femininity. And I think the outcomes of toxic masculinity, like you said, could be more so like unaliving or physical violence, whereas the outcomes of toxic femininity might be manipulation or control in a different kind of indirectly.
It's direct. It's just underhanded.
Uh-huh.
But to be very clear, it's all abuse. It doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter how they enact it. It's all abusive. Whereas with the, let's say, an overt male narcissist, you can't confuse someone menacing you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like in your face. But someone gaslighting you, someone telling you one thing, then doing another, or just sabotaging you to the point where you're questioning your own self. You're questioning your thoughts. You're questioning, did I do that? Did I not do that? So that's actually, in my opinion, sometimes quite a bit more insidious because it causes you to not trust yourself.
Point, definitely point taken. All abuse is abuse, and I don't want to gloss over the point that women can get physically violent as well. You know what I mean, and can be menacing in certain situations depending on the individual. So I don't want to gloss over that as well. So that's a very good point. Um, can you talk a little bit about like your personal journey, and how you came to this awareness of like narcissism?
Sure. Uh, so I look at it a couple of different ways, but primarily I kind of exist in a more spiritual place. One of my spiritual gifts is that I'm an empath, which that kind of seemed to almost set me up to um, draw narcissists to me to some extent. So as an empath, right, I'm attuned to like the emotions, the feelings of other, like I feel them. Um, so Narcissists that I encountered kind of happened when I started dating, so around the ages of 18, 19. Um, and It was like I would meet, I'd meet them like my first significant relationship. I could kind of tell, he felt like he was missing something, or he felt like he needed help. And so that part of me wanted to help him, and narcissists can be extremely charismatic, very charming. So you don't really know that you're in it until you're in the thick of it, because as I said, it's really, really insidious. Um, so from like 18, 19, my very early um, part of my life or whatnot, that was someone that I uh, ended up being with for a while, being married to, as you know. Um, and I think I could honestly say almost everything, every action that that person took um, was for their own edification, whatever made them feel good. Whether it was children, whether it was, how's it, no matter what happened, my thoughts, feelings, needs, none of that counted. Um, Birthdays, unless it was like my birthday specifically, he would intentionally ruin. Um, the only holiday that he did not intentionally ruin was Christmas because that was his favorite holiday. So situations like that, like I said, I got out of that, met someone else a little bit along the way. They turned out to be a narcissist as well. So I started kind of having a look at what it was in me that made me see them. Once I really started to understand this, oh, I want to save these people and help these people, and they'll present themselves like they need help, they want help.
Right.
It's just all a part of the lure.
No, I had never really, thought about narcissism that much until until I got much older. I mean, until we, got into a relationship, and I started to. That was like my first encounter with it, with the term in real life. I mean, I knew what it meant, but not really. You know what I mean? And like upon reflection, it was like looking at different people I dealt with in my life from childhood. It was like, oh wow, these are those type of traits. You know what I mean? Like when you look at a father-son relationship, when the father is only concerned about the son when he meets these specific, criteria, you know what I mean, which allows him to be proud, allows him to maybe show you off, or kind of check a box on a list of things that he wanted to do as a father, as opposed to dealing with the child as a person, and dealing with the child as their own being that's going to have their own destiny that may go outside those boundaries, but it's still, your son. You know what I mean? I think a lot of times men get locked into the idea of legacy, and the child being the focal point only in as a function of that legacy, not necessarily as their own being to choose their own destiny, but just an extension or a carbon copy, if you will, of yourself. And you relate to that carbon copy because that's you, you know what I mean, but not necessarily that person being their own being. I looked at some of the relationships that I was in that was very very transactional, very much. You end up feeling like you've been used, right? But I think the hardest thing is when you have to look in the mirror. As a man, this is something I had to do and say, is it I? Am I a narcissist? Am I exhibiting the very traits that have hurt me, throughout my childhood? And that was always one of my greatest fears because, I mean, I, experienced and watched my mother go through certain abusive relationships. And it was like, that was what I never wanted to be, you know what I mean? But it's a curious thing when you're exposed to something, right? Sometimes you still wind up mimicking that in ways you don't even expect. So for me, that was like stonewalling. That was basically becoming an automaton, as far as, and this is for me the relationship between patriarchy and narcissism, where the emptiness that's in you, you know what I mean, you're told that that's a good thing, that's stoicism, and then you know you as a man are basically that 24/7 soldier, on the battlefield of life, and you seek out a woman to be your peace. You know what I mean? To be your happiness, or to bring the emotional balance that you lack inside yourself, because you're not in contact with your emotions, so you need somebody else to almost feel for you. And it's an unhealthy way to be. And I really had to learn that myself and say, okay, this is not who I want to be. I don't want to be a robot. I don't want to be a character of myself at 40 years old, 50 years old, wondering, how did I live my life? One of the things my mother told me a long time ago, she was like, don't forget to stop and smell the roses, right? And that didn't even compute to me as a man. Like, as a man, why would I? First of all, I don't see any roses in my environment. There's not a lot of flowers growing where I am. A lot of people don't take the time to grow flowers anymore. But secondly, why would I ever take the time to smell flowers? That's, what I mean, I thought that is something purely feminine. But what she was telling me is, don't forget to take time to just enjoy, not just enjoy your life, because I think sometimes we get distracted, and we equate distraction with joy, but actually experience life in the fullness of what it is, including your marriage, son. And I completely went over my head. But um, so we have a lot of, I had a lot of work to do. You know what I mean? And I wanted to ask you, like, what are some of the lessons that you learned, like some important lessons you learned in dealing with narcissism, whether it be, okay, this is how you survive a narcissist, this is how you identify a narcissist. Like, what are some of the lessons that you like to share, in that topic?
Okay, so I have a couple, and you may have seen me smirk a little bit because I have a very serious dislike for narcissists. But but basically, and I think I shared this with you before. One of the things that I had to really accept and come to just come to the conclusion and accept, regardless of how many times a narcissist says, "I love you," we were friends, I allowed myself to finally say, this person means me harm. This person does not love me, did not, cannot. Um, and it would always be in my best interest to basically get the hell out of Dodge. Is that one of those things you cannot say on TikTok? But it's like a
This is a safe space for profanity. If you report for that, then I don't know. We were bound to get shut down anyway. If hell is a word that you can't say, so please proceed.
but yeah, because one of the conversations, and I've shared most of this stuff with you, um, the that first marriage or whatever. One of the things that was said to me, um, towards the end is like when it was almost weird. Like when he met me, I was this bright, shiny penny. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like in school, working, no children, my own apartment. I mean, really just focused on me and building me and growing and all of that. Um, and his first thought, okay, let me see what I can do to break her. And by the time we divorced, one of the things that he said was, I broke you. And that there was no remorse. There was no, I mean, it was almost like there wasn't really pride there either. You know what I mean? It was just a statement of fact. I feel good about it, and I would do it again. And so for me, I was like, oh, definitely showed me who he was. Yeah, we're not cool. We're not friends. Um, Co-parenting became an exercise in let me make sure that he can't do these things to the children, you know. And in some instances, it became letting the children know if you go with your dad, you gotta kind of watch yourself. You gotta protect yourself. You have to watch for certain things. Um, and Thankfully, they were very aware. They will call stuff out, and sometimes when they would call stuff out with him, I would have to go and then get them so that they weren't, in a difficult spot. But it's always best to know what you're dealing with. It's always best to know, like, I would not ever, at this point in life, see that someone's a narcissist or they're exhibiting narcissistic traits, because there's a
Right.
difference, as I said, between the disorder and someone having the traits. But it's still all abusive, it's still all harmful.
I think it's important to highlight that narcissism is a spectrum, right? So and maybe we all sit on that spectrum in some way, shape, or form because you want to have a high self esteem, you want to feel good about yourself, you want to have confidence. You know what I mean? Maybe even a little bit of arrogance in some cases. We all have those human traits that can fall into pride and kind of the ego and things of that nature. But when you get into a more of a chronic um, narcissism, it's where you're actually feeding off of somebody else. And I heard you when we discussed this before, like almost like you're trying to destroy that person. You know what I mean? It's not even a symbiotic relationship, right? It's a consumption. Um, and I think that again, like when you get into patriarchy, right? Because the way patriarchy has almost framed femininity and framed women, it's as a product to be consumed. It's as a uh, you know either object or a resource or a utility, but not recognizing that person as their own autonomous self that has their own dreams, their own destiny, their own boundaries that should be respected, all of those things. And so I think, in that way, American society might make it easy, or almost like a breeding ground or a petri dish for narcissists, especially, male narcissists. But I think every action has this equal and opposite reaction, right? So if you have all these male narcissists running around, as maybe even as a survival mechanism, a woman might develop their own form of narcissism just to, identify themselves. I don't know. What are your thoughts on like how on American society? Like, do you agree with that? Do you think American society kind of encourages, promotes, or creates narcissists? If so, why? And if not, why not?
Um, okay, so I guess the short answer for that would be absolutely yes. Um, there are studies that show that. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
There are studies that show that more individualistic societies are more prone to um, narcissists, the existence of narcissists, um, because narcissism in and of itself is a very selfish, insular thing, right? So, like, um, America is a patriarchal place, it just is, um, and part of that patriarchal aspect of America is from like the faux um, adherence to like this biblical standard.
Right.
And the thing with that is often like most of the people that push this biblical standard, they simply just don't adhere to it themselves. They just want to push it off on other people,
Right.
which if you're going to look at it that way, that could almost be looked at like projection, which is something that happens in narcissism, you know what I mean? Or deflection. You did this, but they're not looking at themselves. They don't hold themselves accountable for anything. The narcissists don't. Much in the same way you'll find in like patriarchal situations, much in the same way you can find in like those biblical or churchy situations, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so I definitely, yeah, and I think I said it before. Um, it's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg, you know what I mean? But they all, in my opinion, operate in lockstep. You know what I mean? You're going to have narcissism where you have patriarchy. We're in America. America's a patriarchal place. I mean, just looking left and right, they're doing whatever they can to take not just women's rights, but other people's rights as well. They just kind of dehumanize, um, let's say, women in for this conversation's purposes, and that's pretty much what narcissists do. They don't see other people as people. They don't matter.
Yeah. No, as you were talking, I was thinking of Gil Scott Heron, in his poem, "The White Man's Got a God Complex," right? And it's like he was speaking about, kind of the racism aspect of the way narcissism kind of shows up in oppressive systems, right? You think that you created everything, what I mean, you're painting, you kind of whitewash religion, and specifically with the church. I was in a Lilith Daughters live a few days ago, and she asked the question, why do narcissistic parents use the church to, in a sense, torture their children, right? And that conversation went many different directions. But one of the things that came to mind for me was how some people are almost narcissistic by proxy, right? They don't have enough courage to be overtly abusive because they're self-conscious, but they will put another person, i.e., the pastor, on a pedestal who's a full-blown narcissist, and use him as a way to, first of all, point the finger at other people, You know what I mean? You bring people to church that have certain flaws, i.e., you might be a member of the LGBTQ community, but you bring your gay friend there, knowing your pastor's kind of stance on that, knowing that they're going to do all of this, when they get there, and it can be a very much a cycle of abuse. You know what I mean? Where you know. You talk about we were talking about burnout, right? And why so many pastors and clergy get burned out, but at the same time, so many pastors and clergy don't want to develop other leaders in their congregation. They want to hold all that power, and so you'll have several associate ministers on staff that never preach. You know what I mean? They just sit there and, yeah, yes, pastor, yeah, that's right. Or they read the word, out loud, and kind of like a patsy, or or something like that, or a yes man, instead of actually bringing up very strong men and women in quote unquote Christ. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think that can also be a bring. Plus, it's very easy to confuse the work of the Holy Spirit to save people working through you and you actually saving people yourself, right? You getting to take the credit. Oh, I pulled you out of the crack house. I pulled you out of the quote unquote whorehouse. You know what I mean? And now I have this cloud I can hang over you anytime you get out of line. Because remember who you were. Remember what I brought. Well, remember what I brought you from, right? It's a very thin line, and I think you have to you have to have a true heart for God, a true heart for people to not cross that line into that narcissism, because people will also put you on that pedestal and ask and want you to be a Christian for them almost, so that they can, go about their lives, but you're the perfect person. So it gets real messy, you know what I mean? But I didn't know, you know, if you wanted to go deeper into kind of church experiences and narcissism, or just other facets of American society where that shows up.
I think it can quite honestly show up in all facets of society because of the society that we live in. It's as I said before, the differences between collectivistic cultures and individualistic cultures is that we are trained pretty much, you know what I mean, to, and by we, I'm gonna say they, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Um, from the time we start school, it's you're kind of taught to make friends, but you're kind of taught to assimilate. You're not really encouraged to be your own person. You're not really encouraged to think your own thoughts, and just to stand out and be your own self. If you do stand out and stand as your own self, your most authentic self, whatever that looks like, you're ostracized often from your peers. But as we've seen,
right,
you have educators that ostracize you. You have educators that will give you hell because you don't ascribe to the agenda that they have in place.
right.
And I'm very convinced that's a big part of the just that American culture. You know what I'm saying? Um, it shows up, in the workplace because again, you automatically that wage gap that exists,
Yeah,
and we know how that goes down. From what is it? The white tea males, white tea women,
right,
uh, black males, and then people that look like me. Um, because as I did that the one study in class where I was like, none of my classmates realized where I fell on the list, and my partners that I was working with, they were uh, white guy. I'm sorry, white tea guy, white tea female, a black man, and myself. And as we worked on the project, and they actually realized that I was on the bottom, I said, "Pay attention to what we're doing. Where do I fall on this list?" And everybody's face was like, and then they were stuck because they didn't know what to say. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you address it now that it's in your face? Often it's ignored because who wants to address it if it's not actually affecting you? You know what I mean? And in my opinion, that's kind of where that patriarchal part comes in as well, because even though one of my partners was a black man, part of what his conversation was, and he was cool, but part of what his conversation was, well, yeah, I experienced that too, but you're not on the bottom. I'm talking about who's on the, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like we couldn't speak to what our research showed because it was like, let me bring it back to me, which narcissism, patriarchy, American culture, you know?
No, I think you also highlighted kind of the some of the pitfalls of just like the Black liberation struggle as a whole, right? Because it's very much centered on, or historically, it's been centered on Black male liberation, right? Not necessarily dealing with Black women. Black women were more so supporting caste, right? And because of that, it's sometimes it's almost like, does that side of the struggle even exist to Black men? I mean, we in the same year, and this was brought up in another live. We had George Floyd and we had Breonna Taylor, but there was a much more hyper focus on George Floyd, not necessarily Breonna Taylor, right? Um, and men could rattle off like so many names of other Black men. Both, no, let me correct myself. Both Black men and Black women can rattle off the laundry list of Black men that have been unalived by police, not necessarily the same laundry list of Black women. And so I think we have to really check ourselves when we when it's brought to our attention that we're exhibiting narcissistic traits, self-centered traits, because it also is a blinder, to what is actually happening in the world around you. If you're only centered in what you can get and what benefits you, you're going to miss so much of what's going on in the world because you have no empathy. You don't have the ability to think from another person's perspective unless it's a form of manipulation. You know what I mean? Unless it's a chess move. And I think you miss really the relational part of what life is all about. You know, um, I thought it was interesting too that the when you look at the domestic violence wheel, a big little pie slice of it is male entitlement. It is it kind of part of what keeps that wheel moving is the belief that you're entitled to, and I'm speaking, as a man, but you're entitled to, domestic service or appreciation, or all these other things, and it just kind of keeps it. When you can't get that control, then that keeps the wheel moving almost. So I wanted to do a kind of something a little bit different. I'm an MCU fan, right? And so we're talking about narcissism, and I wanted to just maybe look at a couple Marvel characters and see, if they're narcissists or not, right? Um, and kind of why, just to kind of again help people think about how to identify narcissistic traits, what and kind of what to do from there. So I'm a fan. I think we're both a fan of Loki, right? So according to the DSM-5, would Loki be diagnosed as a narcissist? Again, this is just for fun. Just what do you think Loki would be a narcissist? Or do you want me to do it? I can do it.
Exactly. That's it. So you knew where I was going with it from.
Yep. Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
as I said, there are 9 diagnostic criteria. So I'll give them to you, and you let me know if you think Loki fits that
Okay.
criteria, and
All
then
right.
you think if he would be diagnosed, in your opinion, as with narcissistic personality disorder, because that's specifically what this is. Okay. Okay. So a pervasive pattern of grandiosity in fantasy or behavior, need for admiration and lack of empathy beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following. So the first one has a grandiose sense of self importance.
Yeah, I would say yes. When I think about kind of his tagline, he's burdened with glorious purpose. I mean, he definitely feels like he is, more important than the rest. I remember in the first Avengers movie where he had everybody kneel and basically worship him, and he really looked at everybody as human beings themselves being created just to do that. You know what I mean? As far as that's concerned. So his view of humanity itself was skewed based on his importance.
The second one is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love.
Yeah, he literally wanted to rule the world. That was his goal, and it was interesting though because he was he was okay with just the world, even though he knew he was going to be part of a grander scheme, where Thanos, I guess, was going to maybe get more power. As long as he could rule the world, which I think was kind of one of Odin's prized jewels, he was also content with his little world. So that was interesting.
Uh, Believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people or institutions.
Yeah, I think I'm going back to Avengers 1 again. I think he thought like all of the Avengers were beneath him. Right? He was like, and that was the funny part when Hulk like grabbed him by the ankles and kind of smacked him around a bit to kind of show him no, Hulk still smash.
Um, okay, so the next is requires excessive admiration. We already know that would definitely be him.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In fact, he actually fell in love with himself or an alternate dimensional version of himself in the Loki season, which was like really interesting because it's like, okay, this is a narcissist facing another narcissist who is a mirror version of himself.
So let's see, five has a sense of entitlement, for example, unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations.
Yeah, I think about I think that was the beginning of was that the beginning of Thor Ragnarok when he was pretending to be Odin, but he was watching a play of himself basically in this the story of his heroism amidst the statue of himself as well. So yeah, he definitely wants to be admired.
Is interpersonally exploitative, i.e., takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially his brother and Odin, and yeah, villain or hero alike. If it's someone he loves, close family, he's the god of mischief.
Okay. Seven, lacks empathy, is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others.
So that's the curious thing about Loki because I feel like towards the end or maybe even like he was able to feel. You know what I mean? I don't know if that was maybe masking, but like I felt like he was genuinely sad that his brother, and he thought his brother passed, was being tortured and was going to be executed by Thanos, right? So he actually sacrificed himself. You know, try to pull a fast one on Thanos, and apparently at that point lost his life in the first Infinity War movie. So I think maybe in extreme circumstances he was able to demonstrate empathy. Now, what gets tricky is, is that were those actions due to him feeling empathy, like true empathy, or and like remorse and things of that nature, or was it that Thanos was impeding on his territory? That was his brother, right? Or like when his father left, that was his father that was lost. So was it more so the possessive aspect or the lack of resources that he was going to have, almost like a cutting off of his supply, or was it true empathy? That I don't know, but he did do what would be perceived as a selfless act, or acting out of his own acting outside of his own self best interest.
That one kind of stumped me too, because I kind of got stuck there because I was like, well, he did it. He seemed sad. He expressed, but again, like you said, it could have been these are mine. You know what I'm saying? It could have been that. So let's see. Uh, eight is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of him or her.
Yeah, absolutely. I think. Well, and see, this is the thing, though. Like, I think, like, if so, Loki. I think we're definitely beyond five now. So I think we've
Yeah.
established that Loki is a narcissist. Peace, Goddess Kasha. How are you? But we're so now it's like, well, how did that happen, right? So the envy part, like, he was a boy, right? Who was an illegitimate child, right? He was not he was not Odin's actual son, but he was basically stolen from his actual family, similar to like a trophy, almost like a hostage, with the Frost Giants, and raised as his son, but never actually treated like his son. So then we have to ask, like, is was Odin a narcissist as well? Right? I mean, he was a god. Did Odin have a god complex? Right? And is that where Loki, because he wants the admiration of his father, right? He's envious of his father as well. He wants his throne. He's envious of his brother. You know, he wants, because he's going to be the apparent heir, right? So you know, how did that develop, right? But I think definitely Loki was envious, right? That's what caused him to. He was motivated by jealousy, and I believe, like I said, he looked down on just about everybody else. I'm sure he felt he was envied as well. So yes, in short.
Okay, and nine shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes.
Yeah, yeah. That's basically Loki's primary character trait. It's his haughtiness and arrogance. So yeah, so Loki is a narcissist.
Like I said, because that specifically is the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. So I always try to make sure that there is clarity between the traits, which, like you said, exist on the spectrum, and the actual disorder, which is an actual personality behavioral disorder.
Right.
So, but yeah, so I think you could successfully say that you diagnosed Loki with NPD.
Now I wonder. I wonder if Thor is a narcissist. Like, especially when you look at the first movie, like before he had his like kind of journey or whatever. When you look at it, like, um, he led his friends into some like pretty dangerous territory just to kind of prove himself. So maybe Thor is uh exhibiting narcissistic traits at the beginning of his journey, and actually, like, through his journey, learns to, first of all, you know, he literally learns how to humanize himself because he loses all his powers, right? So he's no longer a god anymore. In the second movie, he learns compassion with his brother. His brother's working alongside him. In the third movie, he, you know, kind of gets beat on too a little bit, loses some pride, loses basically all of Asgard, you know, as soon as that's concerned. And then by the end of the fourth movie, he's now a single dad, right? You know, dealing with daughter problems and stuff. So I wonder if that is a redemption arc too of Thor moving from a person exhibiting narcissistic traits to someone who genuinely has empathy, not only just for his peers, but also for humanity.
That's actually a good one because we hadn't, like, we had talked about Loki because, we
Right.
have a different, but Thor was a good one. But I think we, again, could safely say that he was narcissistic as well because God, he's a God. Who is he answerable to?
Right.
And part of the whole narcissist piece is they don't hold themselves accountable for anything. Well, if you're a God, what do you have to hold yourself accountable for? So, like you said, he had to learn um, those, a more humane way of interacting and dealing with people.
No, absolutely. So we got a couple others, right? So Goddess Kasha says Thor was narcissistic before he met Jane. I forgot about, like, Jane. Jane was his supply lightweight at first.
I think initially Jane was supplied because he didn't. Again, if you have those narcissistic traits, if you're a narcissist, there's not really a differentiation. As I said, narcissists will let their children be their supply. They don't really differentiate because they don't truly love, you know. So in understanding, it's a movie. So
Yeah,
you have to learn. But in real life, they have to have intensive therapy, intensive counseling. Let me use the right word.
right.
Um, and they have to want to change. They have to acknowledge that there's something wrong with them or they're a narcissist, which, as I said, it kind of goes back to they don't hold themselves accountable. So often you're not going to see a lot of people diagnosed because they're not going to go in to get the diagnosis.
Yeah.
There's nothing, yeah, something wrong with the supply. There's something wrong with anybody complaining.
Yeah, I got to think more about because looking at Love and Thunder, right? Love and Thunder is the moment of transition where Jane is no longer supporting cast, right? Because she literally existed in that plot just as a prop, right, for Thor, right? Until the fourth movie where she gets powers in her own right, and now Thor has to decenter himself a little bit. Like, wait a minute, I'm not the only hero on the battlefield. What's going on? You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that was, and I Love and Thunder. That was my favorite one, but I think it was very much important to his development. Now that I think about it, let's do Thanos, and then let's do Black Panther. I think,
And I'm not gonna read them all the way through. I'm gonna just get that first piece.
okay,
You said Thanos.
yeah, Thanos.
You already know. But okay. Okay.
Yeah, heroes are
Grandiose.
probably more interesting, but we're getting a baseline, right? A baseline, and I think it's important because Loki and Thanos were like two totally different types of villains, right? With
And,
two different missions.
and as we said earlier, narcissism and the trait and the disorder, they do exist on the spectrum. So that makes sense. So, okay. Did Thanos have a grandiose sense of self importance?
He, absolutely, he literally thought he was the only being in the universe that could save the universe.
Uh, was he preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love?
So here's what's interesting about that, right? I think like Thanos, there was a self-deprecating aspect to Thanos. Like I don't think like because you look at what he did after he accomplished his purpose, right? He didn't get this big grand castle to retire from. I mean, he didn't do any of that. He actually got the smallest cottage and was like a farmer. You know what I mean? On this place, just an old man, no companionship, so he wasn't looking for love. So I don't, yeah, I don't think he was grandiose in that way.
Now, and I'm glad you actually said that because another aspect, as we mentioned earlier, is not just overt narcissism, which is the
Right,
grandiose piece. There's also covert narcissism, or what they call vulnerable. I don't consider it vulnerable because it's an act, kind of. You know what I mean?
right,
It's affectation. So him living, in that shack or whatever. Um, I still am like, that was just a piece of that covert affectation because
mm,
Thanos didn't think he was a bad guy. He didn't think he was a villain. Everybody else did.
right,
Everybody else experienced him as a villain. And most narcissists don't necessarily think they're bad people. Other people are the problem.
right. And now that you mention it, like his vision for himself was once he accomplished his goal, he was just going to sit back and watch the sunset on a grateful universe. So even though he looks humble, right, in this kind of shack, and he's a farmer, that's just feeding into his mythology of himself. When really inside, he's like, yeah, the whole universe is grateful to me because I have saved them. So he would like Loki would be the narcissist you got into a relationship with and found out, oh, this dude is just about himself. Thanos would be the pastor and you join his church and he's self-absorbed with his glorious mission and just completely neglects his parishioners.
That. Let's see. Where was I on two? He believes that she is. Okay, so this is three. Um, did he believe he was special and unique and could only be understood or should associate with other special or high status people?
This is also a tough one, and by the way, I like Thanos too. He's one of my favorite villains. But I think there was still some stuff that was going on with Thanos. We gotta realize, right? So he had a fairness about him, right? He wanted he said it was going to be 50-50, right? Some half of the universe was going to get unalive, half was going to be alive. There was going to be no partiality. It wasn't going to be like the bourgeoisie were going to be the ones that survived and the poor folk were all worthless or whatnot. So he didn't have that going on. I don't think he was going to exterminate himself though.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
Fair, truly fair,
right,
would have been him putting himself on that chopping block as well.
right,
He was willing to sacrifice everybody else, anybody else, but himself,
right,
which, in my opinion, is cowardice as well. Because you know what I mean. You have this great purpose. You're doing this great thing, but you're not putting yourself on a chopping block. You're just
right.
randomly choosing other people, but you're not in that little randomized selection.
Yeah.
Let's see. Required excessive admiration.
I don't know if it was. I don't think it was admiration. He required excessive obedience. Like he required. So if obedience translates into admiration, then maybe I wasn't. He wouldn't be the God that you worshipped. He would be the God that you served. Right. He didn't care what he wasn't much for feelings. You know what I mean? He was very much purpose driven as far as this is what we want to accomplish, and yeah, you need to fall in line with my purpose.
Um, I agree with that. Sense of entitlement, unreasonable.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. Sense of entitlement. He felt like the Infinity Gems belonged to him. He was the only one that could wield them. He felt like he had the right to make this decision for everybody else. Yeah, absolutely.
yep. Is interpersonally exploitative.
Absolutely 100%. Even down to the daughter that he loved so much. I mean, and I feel like he truly loved her as much as he could, but he was willing to exploit that relationship to the point where first of all he Jedi mind tricked her to show where the gem was, and then he wound up throwing her off the cliff in order to get the soul gem. So yeah, he was absolutely uh, going to exploit any relationship to get his goal accomplished.
Now, I think I have a little different view on that. Oh, I agree with that, but
Yeah.
I don't think he genuinely loved her. I think he loved what she represented. I think that he didn't love her. He loved who she represented in connection to him.
You're right.
Because again, if we're talking narcissist, NPD, they don't love, not truly,
No,
right?
you bring up
So
a great point because when they were in his throne room, he was like, basically listing all of her good qualities and was like, me. Yeah, but I never taught you how to lie. That's why you're so bad at it. Right. No, you're absolutely right. So he was in love with that version of himself that he saw in her.
lacks empathy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, right? Because Thanos was emotionally intelligent, but it was for the purpose of strategy and manipulation. So it wasn't that he actually felt compassion, what I mean, in that way, what I mean, or he had deadened down so much that that compassion didn't show up in reality. But it was so he was emotionally intelligent, but he used that intelligence to manipulate. So he could think from Tony Stark's perspective, but still have no empathy for Tony Stark's position. That's kind of dangerous.
And that's something that I think is something that I had to learn
Yeah,
about narcissists, is that they can be extremely intelligent. You know what I mean?
right.
They almost have to be able to manipulate and function the way that they do. So often they are quite quite intelligent, possibly brilliant, but
Yeah.
it's all to the bad. It's all to the bad for everybody except them. Um, is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of them.
Definitely, I definitely think he felt other people were envious of him. You know what I mean? Covetous. He was covetous for power, right? And Thanos, especially if you get into the comic books, like Thanos, even beyond the Infinity Gems, wanted power, right? Um, and as a deviant, you know, his race was looked down upon. So he had that going complex as well. Like he was a cosmic being, but he definitely wasn't the strongest cosmic being, but he was the most crafty. And that's what made Thanos dangerous. Like in the comic books in the Infinity Gauntlet series, he doesn't get those gems that way at all. Like they completely rewrote that story. He actually tricks the more powerful gods into getting those gems, and each one he tricks and plays off their weaknesses, their ego, their pride, their sense of security, and is able to grasp these gems from them, even though they're more powerful beings. So yeah, he's not envious in the way of irrationality. He's power thirsty. And in the comic books, it's to impress death. So he also has a very kind of psychosis going on as well.
And then the last one shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanos definitely is haughty, arrogant. He's very much a proud being as well, even though he's more, like you said, covert with it.
You said someone asked about Black Panther. So
Yeah, Black Panther.
you want to do them? You want to diagnose him, Doc?
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm not a. Neither of us are medical professionals. We just, got a hold of a DSM and we're going through it. Though my wife is studying, you know what I mean. So that's awesome. And by the way, okay, this is my T-shirt healing season. Too much sass LLC as my wife's T-shirt company. So I'm modeling that today. You can't see because it's head up first, but you can go to my link tree. You can go to my TikTok shop, or you can just go to toomuchsassllc.com to pick up one and many other forms of apparel. Black Panther is interesting, right? Let's get into the specific questions. I got to think about this one. That was a real quick. I'm gonna go back and see who answered that question. That is a tricky one. People, wireless women, how are you? Who asked the question? It was Teacher Man 281 asked one about Black Panther. Okay, all right, let's go through it. We can do this one. This could be the. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was listening to you. Okay, so you ready to do him?
Yep.
Alrighty. Um, Grandiose sense of self-importance.
Let me think about that for a moment. So,
Gotta be
yeah,
more of the nine.
right. So we got he comes into play after his father is assassinated, right? So he's I'm gonna say no, and I'm gonna say no because when Falcon and I think it's Falcon and Captain America first get to Wakanda, um, Captain America attempts to bow to to uh, to T'Challa. He says, "No, we don't do that here." Like I think he is more so focused on custom made. That doesn't mean he's because he T'Challa was kind of a brat. He definitely had that brattiness of royalty about him. But I wouldn't say that I wouldn't go so far as to say that the grandiose part. I could be I could be wrong though. I could be wrong. I'm open to different opinions. If the comment section folks wanna disagree with me on that, but I'm gonna say no to that one. What do you think?
I could, because I was sitting here thinking of like the different, I guess the different aspects or whatever. But I agree with you. I don't think he exhibited grandiosity. All right, number two, preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love.
He definitely so he did have an ideal love interest, right? You know, but he respected her boundaries, right? He didn't force himself on her. They had a very respectful relationship, actually, even though the movie begins, the first Black Panther movie begins with him kind of barging in on her mission. So he definitely was a boundary pusher in that way because he just kind of blew her undercover mission. But he felt it was for a good cause. So it kind of gets into the male entitlement piece. I think T'Challa had some male entitlement about him because again he felt it was because he was going to be king that he it was his right to push that onto her. So maybe that's an entitlement coming from royalty, or that's more male entitlement or machismo. I don't know, but I wouldn't go so far as to say it was a narcissistic trait. I don't know.
I don't think he was. Could be the male piece. I think it leans into the male and the royalty piece. Um, okay, believes that he or she is special, unique, and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people.
No, I don't. I feel like T'Challa was a man of the people, right? Now, was Wakanda narcissistic? Is another question, right? Because Wakanda's policies and procedures, they definitely thought that they were special, and they were okay with the rest of the world kind of going to hell in a handbasket. The rest of the African diaspora, as long as they kept the integrity of their society, right? So I feel like T'Challa's personal character and Wakanda's political priorities are at play with each other in those movies, and that's part of what made that movie so good. You know what I mean? Because it's T'Challa wrestling with the narcissistic nature of his society, the patriarchal nature of his society, right? Remember, he goes to his ancestors and literally almost cusses them out because of the way they did certain things. So I think the outcomes and the way they behaved in society was narcissistic because they had this special aura. So they definitely thought they were special, right? But I think that's what goes into T'Challa's character because like his he said it's hard to be a good king. It's kind of like what the whole play on that is, right? T'Challa, is a good man, quote unquote. We talked about good men before, but he's quote unquote the good man that's put in a very precarious political position. And it's what type of decisions is he gonna make in those decisions? Is he still gonna remain a good man, or is he gonna be corrupted like the kings before him?
Let's see, where are we? So we're on five. Has a sense of entitlement, i.e., unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations. I think that one is hard because he was royalty. Is it
Yeah.
unreasonable? So,
Well, and I think this might be a good time to talk about Killmonger, right? Because I think Killmonger would probably fit more in line with inhibiting narcissistic traits than it, because that's kind of I guess the contrast, right? He even though he wasn't royalty, he came in with more entitlement, right? He barged into the throne room. He's like, oh, I'm gonna take it. And when he became king, he functioned more as a tyrant, right? More, someone that was really just self-serving, even though he had this kind of, glorious purpose too, or vision. A lot of it was more so about him. And you can see that by the way he treated women, by the way he treated the elders, and the disdain that he had for Wakandan society in general.
Good call. Good call. Um, is interpersonally exploitative.
Uh, I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say no to that because like there were like his friendship with Captain America. I don't think he ever exploited that. His with the Winter Soldier, he let the Winter Soldier stay with him. So I didn't see T'Challa as a user. In fact, in some cases he got used. Um, but he was about his daddy though. Like he had a single minded focus when it came to getting revenge for his dad. But I think that's one of those pivotal points in his character where he could have went the narcissistic route or not even like displayed more selfish traits to get that revenge, but instead decided not to preserve his honor and to preserve his goodness. And that was at the end of I think Civil War.
Let's see.
Y'all are putting my MCU knowledge to the test, man. I'm over here sweating.
Lack empathy is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. That absolutely wasn't him.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Um, is often envious of others or believe that others are envious of him or her. That wasn't. I can't think of anything that shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. I don't
No,
think.
again, there was some hints of royal brattiness, but no, I don't think he. So I think it's safe to say that T'Challa, at least according to our analysis right now, was not didn't have MPD. You know what I mean? And I don't even know if Killmonger had MPD, but more so was exhibiting narcissistic traits and was really behaving out of deep seated trauma. But again, because even he had remorse, at the end of it, and show empathy. He was just hardened. You know what I mean? But that leaves a question, right? We look at redemption arcs. Is there a redemption arc for the narcissist, right? I think about Tony Stark's, right? And at the end of the, I think Tony Stark's, even though we didn't go through the DSM with him, I think he could be characterized as, if not having MPD, having some significant narcissistic traits. But at the end of the day, he's the person who made the sacrifice play, in contrast to Captain America, to throw his body on the grenade and for the entire universe. So is there a redemption arc for the narcissist in real time, and what does that look like?
So, because like I guess there's two different things, right? Uh, there's the clinical piece, and then there's my personal experience piece. Personally, I don't think that for someone that has like a full blown NPD that there is a cure. And actually, technically, there's no cure. So that's not just my opinion. That's researchable.
Okay.
However, and I think I said this earlier, they can get intensive counseling. There are different modalities that uh, could be helpful. Um, I think the one that I looked at, I think they were talking about uh, DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. Um, I'm trying to remember if there were any others, but that's the one that I'm coming up with right now. But that would be years of therapy. That would be years of therapy. Um, and and like I said, for the most part with MPD, partly the trick to that is they have to go in. They have to go in and get a diagnosis. And for the most part, people that are narcissistic aren't going to go in to get diagnosed because they don't think that there's anything wrong with them. You know what I
Right.
mean? But again, and I think I said this before too, even if you're dealing with somebody that has just 5 of the traits, or let's say 4 of the traits that would be necessary for a diagnosis of NPD, they're still narcissists. Narcissists are still extremely harmful because again, that lacking empathy, that sense of entitlement, the narcissistic rage, the all of that's just very destructive behaviors. You know what I mean? So again, as far as I've found, there's no cure. There's therapy, and they would have to go. They would have to go consistently. They would have to um, be determined to change. And we're not talking a few days or a few sessions. We're talking years. Now that's like the clinical piece or whatever. But
Right.
in my opinion, nah, there's no redemption. They suck.
Well, it almost seems like it's learning how to manage the symptoms, right? So that you can mitigate the impact that you have on others and even mitigate the impact you have on yourself to want to get better, right? And that will require you to admit that you have a problem, right? And that could be a very hard thing for a narcissist to do because part of them enjoys what they do. Part of them gets part of the issue is they get a thrill from it, or they take they get a benefit from it. So yeah, if you there is a redemption arc, but you have to be able to really want. Um, First of all, you have to see that there's a need for it, right? You have to get out of your comfort zone and decide that you want something different for your life, and hopefully that's you looking at your loved ones and seeing okay, the impact of this, even though I can't necessarily sense it or feel it, what I see is the way life is turning out for these the other people is not a good outcome, and I want to have a better outcome, even if it's for narcissistic reasons. You know what I mean? Um, so it seems like we've talked about NPD, and I think it's very clear that like NPD is a mental health issue, right? Can you talk a little bit about the benefits of, first of all, the benefits of therapy, right? And the importance of, some of the things that you can do to establish a healthy mental state.
Dealing with a or having dealt with a narcissist, or just
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
For the narcissists themselves and also for their supply, like how do you what's the importance of therapy for both parties, and also what are some I guess ways to get obtain and maintain those healthy mental states.
okay. So for the narcissist, as I said, I think I'm a bit biased. Because again, the trick there is they have to want to not hurt people anymore. They have to want to be better. And often that means that they have to be braver than they usually are, right? Because um, though they quote unquote think highly of themselves, they're actually dealing with a very low self esteem, a low sense of self. So they like seriously overcompensate. Um, but like I said, the first part would be for them to um, find a counselor that's capable of dealing with uh, narcissism or treating narcissism, because it doesn't just have to be full blown NPD. Narcissistic traits are narcissists are going to narcissist, right? But
Right.
as I said in my previous marriage, we went to a therapist because there was a lot of gaslighting going on, and I literally felt like I was losing my mind. We went to a therapist and we were talking. And when it was his turn to just kind of speak, and she said, "Well, why do you feel like you're here?" He said, "I don't know. I do everything that my wife asks. I don't understand." And I mean, he was so convincing for that therapist.
Right.
She turned to me and said, "What was wrong with me?" And so it's understanding that you have to find a therapist that understands what narcissistic traits look like, what they are, how um, destructive they are and how honestly sneaky they are. You know what I mean? Because again, as I said, they're charismatic, they're charming. You don't know you're in the thick of it until you're in the thick of it. Now, as far as the victims, for lack of a better word, of narcissistic abuse, what I found helpful, and give me 1 second. Okay, so what I found helpful was just fully understand this person is not my person. They never were my person, and I'm okay with that, right? Um, Whether it's okay, I have children with this person, we spent years together, I've known this person my whole life, doesn't matter. Not a good person, not a good person for me to be around, right? Um, so some, I guess, just tips for healing from narcissistic abuse is accepting that the person behind the mask is very different from the person that you first met. This person you first met, that's when they're doing the love bombing. That's when they're hiding. That's when they're mirroring everything that you're doing. That's where they're getting to know you, but they're getting to know you so they can use that information against you, right? So you just have to really accept that the person that you may have been in a relationship with was not the person that you were actually in a relationship with. You were in a relationship with the representative that they sent for you specifically. Um, uh, you have to remember and validate yourself. You're not crazy. Everything that you know they did to you, and they did it intentionally. Own that. It might hurt. Sometimes you might feel dumb, but don't own that piece of it. Just acknowledge again, this person did this with the intent to get in your space and steal your joy, steal your energy, or whatnot. Doesn't make you a bad person. Narcissists actually seek out, they prefer really good people because caring people have something that they lack. It's something that they want, but they also hate the fact that they don't have it, so they hate the person that has it.
Right.
Um, uh, this is important, though it might sound crazy. You know, it would be nice to say, "Oh, that person was horrible. I don't grieve that whole situation." If you feel like you're grieving the situation, allow yourself to grieve. You know, even if it was, I thought this person was my friend, or I thought this person was someone I trusted. You did trust them. You believed the representative that they sent. It's not on you, that's on them. You know, I've heard it said, "Oh, you allowed. You don't go into a situation saying, lie to me, trick me." You know what I mean? Uh,
Right.
so don't let other people convince you that you did something wrong. No, it's all on the person that chose to do it. Give yourself grace. And honestly, you don't have to, because another thing that will happen is narcissists will say, "Oh, well, let's just be friends." Can't be friends with that person. You're supply. They weren't your friend. They don't want to be your friend. They want to keep you as supply. So,
Good point. I think as you were speaking, what came to mind was a lot of times men will say, "Well, women want us to lie to them, right? You know, if we didn't lie to them, then the relationship wouldn't work." And it's like it's a way to justify not showing up in your relationship as your authentic self. And if you're not able to show up in your relationship as your authentic self, it may be a sign that you need to work on your authentic self, right? It may be that you've been wearing a mask for so long that you've forgotten who your authentic self is, right? Because you're sending a representative to every other, person, and never actually being yourself. I was on a live about a week ago, and a guy was talking about, I have to come home and decompress, and I need to, you know, uh, basically put on my switch on my home mode, right? And anytime I hear a man talk about himself in mechanical terms, it's, I hate to use the word red flag, but it's a red flag, but not a red flag it's a red flag for that person themselves. If you're referring to yourself in mechanical terms, where you have switches and you have to turn yourself on, turn off, all these other things, you know it's really that you're masking. You're wearing a mask at work, and you need time to decompress to take that mask off. but then you're also putting another mask on at home, and it's like, no, you need to allow yourself to be yourself, and not you are not just the role that you play. What I mean, you might play a role out of necessity, but at the end of the day, what does you, the human being, look like? And if you don't know that, what I mean, it may be a part of the reason why at least you're exhibiting these narcissistic traits, because you're looking for someone else to be a human for you. Um, I wanted to. I know we promised to keep it within a certain boundaries, and we're just about at time. Like, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share for anyone that might be struggling? That might be struggling with their narcissism, or which maybe that's a oxymoron, struggling with your narcissism, but or maybe struggling with a narcissist that's in their life.
My experience with narcissists, I don't think that they struggle. I think that they enjoy what they do. But because I do, still exhibit some form of empathy or measure of empathy for, because maybe it really is a thing. Maybe at some point they get tired of it. Because there's a guy that I follow that says he has full blown MPD, and he works at it. He's worked at it consistently, so that he's okay. But he also acknowledges that if he stops therapy or if he stops working at it, all of those old habits come right back out. You know, because they're a part of that person.
Yeah.
But in the case that a person is a narcissist, and they know that they know what they do, they know that they're harming people. Um, Find a therapist that is skilled in dealing with narcissistic traits, PD, or whatever the case may be. Um, for a person that is maybe in a relationship with a narcissist, my honest opinion, get out. Um, I don't. Uh, yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that to make it nicer. If you know that the person is causing you harm, there's one of the things I think when we were talking about it, um, was how do you know you're in a relationship with a narcissist? And my answer was, oh, you're miserable. You know what I mean? And I can joke about it now, but when I was in the thick of it, every day was misery. And it was worse because I had to hide um, the agony, quite honestly, that I was dealing with from my children. So I had to get up, put a face on, hide everything for them, still protect and shield them. You know what I mean? And and at the end of the day, I ended up with someone who was very able to smile on my face and say, "I broke you. That was what I meant to do." You know what I mean? So if a person if they feel like they're in a relationship with a narcissist, that means you're already feeling like you're beat up. That means you're already going through those changes and those experiences. My honest opinion, get out. Do what you can to get out. If you have a support system, utilize them. Don't collect $200. Don't let them talk to you. They don't regret it. They meant to do it. Just get out. And then our youngest daughter, wanted me to make sure that we mentioned um, that there are certain things, though narcissists are not reliable people, you cannot count on them to love and care for you. Um, but because we have daughters, we have to pay attention to who they are interacting with as well. And so she wanted us to kind of do the list of what you can count on narcissists to do. Um, you can absolutely count on narcissists to ruin special occasions, unless it benefits them. Um, you can absolutely count on them to pretty much mistreat their own children, because they can be there, they can be present, and absolutely not present, which is abusive.
Yeah.
Um, you can count on them to treat strangers better than their alleged loved ones because they want that admiration. They want people to see them a certain way. Actually, a dangerous thing that you can do is out them, like let people know who they really are, that can trigger a narcissistic rage. And like I said, that can be frightening to deal with. And that's personal experience. You can count on narcissists to make you feel lonelier than you have probably ever felt in your life. You can count on them to make sure that you feel unlovable, unloved, unworthy, and invisible. And you can count on them to try and destroy you and try and destroy your trust in human nature. They also, if you happen to get out of it, they will try and destroy your name. They will lie. They will completely flip the scenario as if you were the narcissist and they were the victim. So they'll try and destroy your reputation. If they have access to any finances, they have no problem destroying that. They want to leave you broke and broken because they don't like you. You know what I mean? And they will make you like, and I think I may have mentioned this before, but I don't know. They'll make you want to give up on yourself. So it's a very, very slippery slope, very ugly slope. So as I said before, if a person feels like they're in a situation or in a relationship with a narcissist, it could be family. Boom,
Yeah.
let them go. It
Yeah,
could be friend, doesn't matter. Let them go.
absolutely. And I think part of that is learning how to install healthy boundaries within yourself and saying this is the behavior that I will tolerate. This is the type of life that I want, and this is the type of behavior I'm not going to tolerate, and this is the type of life that I do not want. And under no circumstances will I allow that. You know what I mean? Um, and but getting to that point can be difficult. You know what I mean? Because this person has targeted you specifically because they feel that you'll be susceptible to that type of abuse. You know what I mean? It's not by accident that you fell into a relationship with this person. This person singled you out for a reason.
But tired of it, you get tired of it.
Yeah.
And a part of my personal issue was I exist as an empath, right? So I feel everything. I feel other people's emotions. I feel the water. I feel the air. I feel everything. And
Right.
because I existed in that, it's like, oh, let me help this person. They just need love and care because we're people, right? And
Right.
and as an empath, as a person, if you've experienced anything, it's like, oh, all we need is love. This person just needs a hug, a pat on the back. No, they don't. And if they do, they don't need it from me. You know what I'm saying? I
Exactly.
I will know. And I encourage anybody else, especially if you're an empath, because they seek out people who want to heal other people. They seek out people who want to help other people. They seek out people that they consider good people, right? And the goal is not just, oh, I want to love this person. I want to be loved by this person. No, it's I hate who this person is because I'm not that. So they're attracted to it, but they hate it.
Right.
So once you, as the person on the receiving end of that, understand that, accept, you can't do this, accept, like set your boundaries, live in those boundaries. If this person does this, I'm out. And you don't have to have that conversation with them because, again, you have to consider sometimes there's a narcissistic rage. If they feel like, because they're entitled, if they feel like you belong to them, how dare you try and leave, right? That can turn into a very frightening situation.
Right.
So it's a lot of flags there. Love bombing is that very first one, and it's euphoric and it's great. Everything after that love bombing is abuse, more abuse, more abuse, more abuse. Once you see it, trust yourself. You know what it is. You know what your gut's telling you. You know what your intuition's telling you. Get the hell out of Dodge. They don't love you, won't love you, can't love you. They're
There you
not.
go. Um, Teaching man asked because we kind of asked the question. This is not on the necessarily on the topic of narcissism, but it's kind of on the topic of masking, right? And the original point was, well, I wear a mask at home because and then the question is, what if the real me is too emotional? I don't want to dump that on the other person. So, you're at work, you're wearing a mask, and you come home as a man, you're putting on another mask, right? And I want to get your thoughts on this, but what I would say to that, right, is that this is one of the good reason to go to therapy, right? Because you're right. Even if your wife is a mental health care professional, right? It's still not wise to just completely emotionally dump on your partner, whether male or female, right? You don't want to do that, but you still want to be able to show up as your authentic self in your relationship, because otherwise you're in a fake relationship, right? And they don't really know you, right? So getting a relationship with a good therapist, and it takes some time to develop a relationship with a therapist. Every therapist is not going to be for you. So learning what type of therapy is best suited to help you, right? Because there's different modalities, there's different approaches. You know what I mean? You might want, if me 5 years ago, me 10 years ago, I probably would go for Christian counseling because I want somebody to understand my religious background, right? Me now, I want to make sure I have a black man as a therapist. I want somebody to understand my cultural background, or I want somebody that's getting family therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, because I don't want to just do talk therapy. I want someone that's going to actually kind of get into the way I'm thinking and help me change a particular behavior, right? So getting that person who's under contract, right? They took a oath, to essentially keep your secrets. You know what I mean? As long as you're not saying that you're going to harm yourself or harm somebody else, that conversation stays between you and your therapist, and they've been trained to be able to handle what that emotional baggage is going to feel like. Plus, they're only going to have you for an hour, not an entire lifetime, right? So they can take breaks from you as they should, right? And if they're even a therapist needs a therapist, right? So, you know, um, it's a great opportunity to start a relationship with a therapist. Interview your therapist like you would interview anybody else that's going to work for you, and make sure they're a right fit. But then, when you get home, start to break that mask down. You know what I mean? Because the reality is your partner is not just there for your body or your mind. You know what I mean? They're also invested in your emotions. You know what I mean? And just being transparent, like one of my problems was exactly that. You know what I mean? I would come home and I felt like, because I did have, as a young man, I had a temper, right? And what I learned to do was to mask, and basically hold it all in, right? And I just happened to be in a relationship with an empath who could still feel me doing this, even though I didn't look like that on the surface. Nobody else knew what was going on for the most part, except maybe my daughters, who are also empaths, right? But I'm going like this, and they're like, man, what's going to happen next? Why is he tensing up like this, right? So, your spouse, your mate can probably feel that too, and it affects them. Thoughts are things, feelings are also things as well, and feelings happen, right? So rather than put on a mask and be this character, this role for this other person, which is going to wear on you, by the way, it's going to wear on you too. Because no method actor can act for years upon end without going a little loop de loop. You know what I mean? You need to be able to be your authentic self somewhere, and if you can't be your authentic self with your own partner, where can you be your authentic self, right? So that's my thoughts. Lee, what were your thoughts, Asa?
Agree with all of that. And that's a big piece. Is that what if your what was his comment? What if his emotions are too much? Was that
Right,
what
right, exactly.
emotions are what they are? There's not really thing as too much. You feel what you feel. Like I said, I'm an empath. One of the greatest gifts to me that pros gave to me was finally understanding. I literally feel everything. You know what I mean? So there's not really a lot of moments when I'm not feeling or picking up other people's stuff. It's learning how to buffer that. But it's not that you're feeling your emotions. What are you doing with them? If you're not acting out, you know what I'm saying, in negative ways or maladaptive ways, then that's fine. You don't necessarily have to come right home and spew everything, but maybe write, maybe journal. If you have any artistic gifts or talents, get it out in those ways. But if you're at home, home should be your safe space. Your partner should be home, your safe space. If you aren't living in that, then you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing the relationship a disservice. You're doing your partner a disservice. Because for the most part, if we're partnered, we want to be there for our partners if they're going through something or dealing with something, and that's significant. Therapy is definitely very important, but it's also knowing that you may only see your therapist once a week. You are with yourself all the time, and often you're with your partner a lot. He and I have taken moments to write poems together. He'll write a line, I'll write a line, we'll keep going. We talk now, like we really, really talk. And I'll preface it with, okay, can I ask a hard question? And I ask him, do you have any hard questions you want to ask me? But it's that authenticity. It's that take the mask off. The mask doesn't help anybody. If your partner really knows you, your partner knows you're wearing a mask anyway and probably doesn't enjoy it. You have to get authentic. If there are children in the mix, usually the children know. Our youngest daughter is an empath. She would come to me. Why does he do? Why is this? Why is that? And I would try and explain it. But there was only so much I could explain because he wasn't really talking to me. I would just let her know, this is what you're feeling. This is why you're feeling it. Those things aren't helpful though. So if you don't want to just spew, go ahead and get into yourself. What do you like to do? You know what I mean? We shoot pool now because I've never been good at it. I knock the balls off the table, but we go play. And I don't knock the balls off the table anymore, but find something that gives you an outlet and then start talking to your partner.
No, and I hear like another thing that came up was like knowing that you need something, right? But not like coaching. Like everybody can't afford to have a personal, individualized coach. You-
Coaches are not good. If it is a mental health situation,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry, I had to just jump back in because it's one of the things we were talking about in one of the classes. A lot of people who call themselves coaches have no training. If what you might be experiencing or talking about is a behavioral condition or a mental health condition or a personality or emotional, be very, very careful because a lot of these people that are coaches, they have no coaching.
You don't want to get a coach for where a therapist should be. You know what I mean? Like let's say for example um, you want to get better at public speaking. You know what I mean? Then you might get someone who coach you on your communication skills. That's not something that your therapist is going to probably do for you, right? So if you're trying to get a particular skill, you want to get more organized. You know what I mean? Those are things that maybe a coach would be for. You want to increase your performance at something, right? But if you're trying to deal with just you know what I mean, and how you think, how you feel, how you function as a human being, yeah, I agree with Aza. You definitely want to get a therapist. Just like you wouldn't get a medical doctor to work on your car. You would get someone that's a mechanic. So you need to get you want to have a team, and that team might include a therapist and a coach, but don't get a life coach when you need a therapist. Absolutely. So if there's any questions in the comments for Aza or myself, we're about to close. But I'm going to be back on in about a half an hour at 2 o'clock with Eliza Van Court. I'm so excited. Got her, and we'll talk. And she actually does coaching. You know what I mean? So that's I didn't catch that parallel, but so stay. Hop back on for that. But I'm going to go. Log off for a little bit and then come back on it too. Aza, thank you so much for being, first of all, my wife and loving me. I appreciate you. But also for being willing to, come on and share your stories, share, the research that you've done, because I know that this is something a lot of people struggle with, right? And, you may not have, I think it was in the comments where it said it's a small percentage of people that actually have NPD, but, because of the society that we live in, there's a whole lot of people that exhibit narcissistic traits, right? And so being able to identify them and spot them and know when to get away is very important. And then if you're a person that is exhibiting narcissistic traits, maybe you don't have the mental disorder, this is an opportunity for you to look at yourself in the mirror and begin to work on yourself. So,
And then just as a last thing, because it did say in the comment thingies that like most people are like only 1% are diagnosed with NPD, but 75% of people, let me say it correctly, about 75% of men carry narcissistic traits. And those men with those traits, or those people with those traits, but the 75% is men, is that male statistic.
Wow.
They are able to cause quite enough damage without full blown NPD.
75, man, we might have to do another live just on unpacking that statistic alone, because that is a that's the ramifications of that are astounding. Like they're so far reaching, because I mean what that means is, like, you roll the dice and 3 out of 4 times you're going to get into maybe not a full blown abusive relationship, but you're going to have some form of abuse there. You're going to have to experience some form of abuse if you're in a relationship with a man, because narcissistic traits are abusive. You know what I mean? That's a so men, if you're not working on yourself, if you're not actively working on yourself, you're probably in that 75%. You're probably in that 75%. If you're not actively working on yourself, you're probably in that 75%.
Whoever wins is the one that writes the history. How did they do it will forever be a mystery. Winning is the mindset you keep when you won't accept defeat. And I repeat, I'm the creator of my sheet. I got some images in my head I don't bother to touch. Anxious cause you don't know who is who and what is what. Setting fires to bridges, yeah, I'm keeping all doors shut. Find solace in being separate cause it's therapeutic. So when you're claiming that you victim, make sure you're the plaintiff. You gon' hear me when I tell you I ain't nothing to play with. I sing it to you in a soft tone, but I got grit. Heard some niggas been talking and listen to what they said, and I'm just mad that she ain't give it to me. And that girl Yon was great when I liked her, but now she ain't with a thing. He said he ain't a fan of marriage, but he passing out rings. Fraudulent, making money, selling off bad dreams. I'm locked up in my head thinking I'm toxic. If you talking down bad, then you may as well just gon' switch up your topic. I ain't got no love for you, gon' stop it. You a thespian and putting up in that, gon' drop it.